Are you struggling with roadblocks as a woman in the challenging and constantly changing world of corporate America? If you feel stuck in your career, you may be holding yourself back and may not even realize it. Prepare to be enlightened by the meaningful discussions here at the No Woman Left Behind podcast. Each week, gather the insight you need to break down those walls of limiting beliefs. Unleash your full potential and unlock the leader within. Listen to raw conversations with corporate women as they share inspiring stories with the purpose of obtaining their dream career and living a truly fulfilling life. Here's your host, Rosie Zilinskas.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the No Woman Left Behind podcast show. I'm Rosie Zilinskas, your podcast host. I am so excited to be finishing the How to Negotiate in the Corporate World series. This has been an 8-episode series on just negotiating from different perspectives. I had 7 incredible conversations with amazing women that will help you position yourself for a fantastic negotiation conversation. And from the series, I have created a document with some powerful phrases that you can use throughout. So that will be on my website at a later point. Before I tell you about my guest today, I do want to remind you that I have some resources, some free resources on my website, which is nowomanleftbehind.com. You can either go on there and do a free quiz. You can do the Corporate Kickstart course, which is just giving you some ideas on how to kickstart your career and what you want to do next. And I also have the Corporate Kickstart consultation. So if you are ready to have a conversation and you want to chat with me about where you might be stuck in your career, you can go on there, go on my contact page and send me an email and we can certainly set that up. So I think I just want to remind you also that there's a few more resources on my website as well. So go on there and browse through my website. So now let me tell you a little bit about Tina Greenbaum. Tina is the founder and CEO of Mastery Under Pressure, a management coaching program for high-performing executives who need to refine and master their interpersonal and interdepartmental skills. Mastery Under Pressure gives CEOs and senior level managers the additional professional and personal tools to not only excel, but to empower their teams and their associates. My conversation with Tina, I will have to say, was a little bit of a therapy session for me because I was going through some stuff at the time of my conversation with her. And it turned out to be the perfect close to the series on how to negotiate, just with everything that she shared on how to become a confident negotiator. That's what I want you to do. That's the whole reason why I had all these conversations, because becoming a good and confident negotiator takes time and practice, and everything that we've talked about over the last couple months will get you to where you need to be in order to have a powerful negotiation. And the main reason why I wanted to go through all these conversations is because I help women articulate their worth with massive confidence, conviction, and credibility. And I'm going to give you some tools to do just that. So stay tuned for my conversation with Tina Greenbaum. Hey guys, really quick, before we get into today's episode, I just want to remind you that if you go on my website, nowomanleftbehind.com, there are some awesome resources on here. First of all, on the homepage, on the top right-hand corner, there is a Kickstart Your Career radio button. And this is the Corporate Kickstart course. It's about 45 minutes. And if you don't know where to start in your career, that's a great course for you to start with. Next, there is a radio button that says, I'm ready for my corner office. If you are at the point where you want to talk to somebody and want to have a consultation with me, you can click on this and it'll take you to my calendar and you will be able to answer a short questionnaire. And you and I can talk for about 30 minutes about where you are versus where you want to be in your career. If you continue to to scroll down on that same page, there is a section that says, let's find out where you are in your career. And there's another radio button that says, take the quiz. This is the Corporate Kickstart quiz. So it'll take you about 10 minutes to take that quiz, but it'll give you some great information. And if you scroll all the way down on that main page, you will see some additional freebies that you can download, which are the Believe in Yourself. And this is 3 steps for women in corporate to stop being left behind. So you click on that Learn More button, you can download that one. There's also the Conversation Starters Checklist. And again, you can click on that Learn More button to download that one. And then finally, the Productivity Strategies Workbook that you can figure out how to be more productive. And you can download that one by going to the Learn More. So again, these are just some awesome resources that I just wanted to make you aware. And now we are going on to our episode. Hi, Tina. Thank you so much for being here on the No Woman Left Behind podcast show. I appreciate you being here. You and I spoke a little while ago, and this episode is going to be specifically on negotiating for women in the corporate world. And you had mentioned to me that it's really important to figure out what happens emotionally when you're going to be negotiating. So that's where I would like to start.
Well, thank you, Rosie, for having me. And it's a great question. What happens emotionally inside when we're negotiating? Well, for everybody, it may be a little bit different, but we're going to talk about, number one, being aware of what's going on inside, because it's that level of awareness that gives us information, personal information about what's happening and what kind of face we have on, how is our body, are we nice and comfortable and relaxed, do we have eye contact, all of those kinds of things that we want to, and I'm sure we're going to talk about them, but what's going on within me and how am I preparing myself to be able to be the best negotiator that I know how to be. So it's not just a one-shot thing. There's a lot of elements that kind of, I have a program we're going to talk about is how to be a confident negotiator. And it's really being able to manage what's going on inside at the same time, being able to manage kind of what's going on in terms of content.
All right. So what I'm hearing you say is that before you even get to the negotiating venue, which is, it could be anything, right? It could be negotiating with your boss. It could be negotiating with your spouse, sometimes your children, but primarily for women in the corporate world, preparation is key, right? And so let's talk a little bit about what your experience is, because I know you're very experienced and you have psychotherapy as your background for your training. But what are some things, in your opinion, that we need to start preparing for that negotiation? And I think one of the other things is how to be a confident negotiator. So maybe that's 2 parts, but let's start with the preparation piece first.
Okay, so I'm going to start with a story.
Okay, great.
I think it sets it up really well. And I tell the story that a number of years ago, I was at a conference and there was somebody and I actually did a talk, and somebody approached me afterwards and said, I would really like to work with you. And can we make some time maybe tomorrow and set some time up? And I said, sure. So in my preparation, I was thinking about how much I was going to charge him. And I knew a lot about his background. I knew what he was looking for, and I knew I could help him. And I knew I had way more experience than probably most people kind of that he was approaching. So all of this I was calculating, kind of thinking about. So I thought about, I'm going to charge him $2,000 a month. And I thought that was a fair figure given his position and my experience and so on. And I also knew, I kind of know how I set a contract with somebody, asking what they were looking for, whether I can provide it or not, and so on and so forth. So I had a really good sense about how to handle the rest of it. But again, this was the first time I was going to charge that much money to anybody. So the next day we have this conversation, we're sitting, we're talking about all these things, his problems and issues and so on. And he says, and so how much do you charge? And I said, $1,500.
Oh my gosh.
This is a true
Oh.
story. I swear. And I start kicking myself under the
So
table.
what happened?
And he said to me, he said, 1,500, I would have paid you a lot more, but sure, let's go. So that what happened was the question that I asked myself. And that was actually the genesis of the course that I created, this Mastery Under Pressure. How did I go from being so sure what I was going to charge him to caving? I mean, I just caved on what I said that I was going to do. Well, number one, I would say that owning your power, owning your weight, your weight in gold, owning your education is really kind of, in the level of training that you have, is really important to acknowledge that to yourself. Now, I know we're talking to women, and I'm a woman and you're a woman, and I know the issues that women get into. And many times we don't do what men do. We kind of underplay a little bit. We kind of like, are you sure? Our boundaries sometimes are not as tight as they need to be. So these are all kinds of things in terms of what's going on internally. And I started to recognize that what I was doing was I was changing based on what I thought somebody would be willing to pay.
Okay.
So if I thought that you were, well off, then I would give you a higher price. If I thought that you maybe, and this would get me into all kinds of trouble. And it wasn't until I started to really pay attention, what was your thinking, Tina? How did you get there? Where I started to really kind of look at some of the issues that we're going to be talking about and that women fall into. It's not that men don't, but we have different sets of whatever, and we do things a little bit differently. And so that was, and in my course, I have a whole bunch of role playing and kinds of things. When I do this live, we look at this issue of what's your price, and when will you give up on your price? Why will you give up on your price? If in fact, you're going to walk away, what does that entail to be able to confidently walk away, not being afraid to risk losing in order to gain? I mean, again, there's a whole bunch of mindset things that jump in here that you want to be able to pay attention to and know the answers to your own questions. Okay, is really, really critically important.
That is so interesting that you already had it in your head that you were going to charge $2,000 a month. And then when you were right in front of the individual, like sporadically, you were like 1,500. And then afterwards you were like, what happened? Like, why did I do that? I think that probably happens more often than not, to women. And I think that's so great that you were able to explore it and recognize it. Now, is there one, I know you said you found yourself changing the price based on the person, but is there one dominant thought that happened to you during that one specific story?
Yeah, I chickened out.
Oh, that's it. Oh man.
I was reaching another level. And I had not tried it out before, and I didn't want to lose the client. That's what I'm saying. You have to be willing to risk losing for the gain. It's a shot in the dark. When you're negotiating and you're looking for a higher salary, or you're looking for, all these different kinds of things, and it's like a blank sheet of paper.
Yes.
And that's why negotiating is so difficult, because we don't know where the ranges are. I just saw recently that, I don't know whether it is in California where I live now or New York where I used to live, that they're requiring companies to put the salary range.
Yes.
Which is, again, a lot easier to negotiate if you know what the range is. But if you don't even know what the range is, you have to prepare and kind of do your research. What are people paying for something like what you do. My ex-husband was in the art business, and that's a business where, it's kind of, how much do you think it's worth?
Exactly. Exactly.
You
That's so
think
interesting.
that's what
So
it's worth.
I do know, well, first of all, I'm glad that we're having this conversation, obviously, because this is actually the last episode in my negotiating series. I had 8 episodes, and I started it with emotional intelligence, but I'm glad that we're having the conversation of, bringing it back to how you feel and your emotions, and the recognition of the thought process that goes on in your head, I think is so critical, because that's the only way that you're going to identify those boundaries and those limiting beliefs that you think, oh my gosh, I don't want to lose this client, or I don't want to lose maybe the promotion or the job offer. So I'm going to like undercut myself.
Yes.
And I think in another one of my guests, we talked about women oftentimes start negotiating with themselves first before they even start talking to another person. Do you have any like examples to that?
Yes, I think a lot of that, we're going to say with preparation.
Yeah, I think preparation is so key.
It really is the whole thing. So basically, my son and I listened to a talk one time of a guy talking about negotiating, and he was calling it the factor. When somebody goes, oh, I couldn't possibly afford that.
Oh, yeah.
You've hit sort of the limit of what their limit is.
Mm-hmm.
But basically, we want to have a bottom line. Now, the bottom line, again, I do a lot of speaking, and sometimes the bottom line is not always in the price of what I'm going to be paid. It could be in-kind services. Like I just did something not too long ago, and they said, well, we can't afford to pay you your fee, but we'll buy your book. So they bought 60 books, which, then ended up to be, a pretty good fee, and so on. So there's all kinds of ways that you can be very aware that it's not always the dollar figure. Okay.
Right.
Let's just say that you have your walkaway price. No matter what, I'm walking away. And you hold on to that because you feel that that is your integrity, again, all the things that we just talked about, what you're worth, and so on. We get very scared that this is the only job that's available to us. This is the only house that I'm ever going to see. This is the only, and then we get caught into, again, giving away our power. Yeah. Right? So recognizing that it's not the only. And can you walk away? Or if you think it's the only and you've been looking for a year and a half and this one fits all your criteria, what are you willing to negotiate on? Again, It may not be if they're going to pay you this salary, but they're going to give you more sick days, or they're going to give you other benefits, or so that everything you have an opportunity to weigh, right? But this piece about this is my walk away piece, and being able to hold on to that and feel good about it. And if it's not this one, it's going to be something else. That this is not the one. This is where, again, the mindset comes in. I happen to kind of believe that kind of life works in a certain way, and spiritually there are certain spiritual laws, and that if we follow them, life works. And if we don't, we buck up against ourselves all the time. And so one of those things is things do happen for a reason. People do show up. Again, this is my belief. You may not believe, but it helps to guide me that if it's not this one, then it just wasn't right. If it's so hard and we're kind of fighting over minutia, maybe this isn't the person that I want to work for.
Yes.
Maybe this isn't the job. Maybe this isn't the client. And so when it comes to paying attention to how you're feeling, see, the challenging thing about negotiation, kind of coming back to what you were saying about your first speaker, we have a whole set of emotions that are happening, and we want to really look like we're calm, we're cool, we're collected, that there's not a lot going on. And that takes mastery.
Yes.
That's
really so interesting. And I guess, so with the preparation and the mindset, and then knowing your kind of bottom line, then that's how you become a confident negotiator. And then practicing, right? Like practicing is going to be pretty key. Now, what are some of the internal skills that you think are the most important to build up as you are trying to become a better negotiator?
Okay. Before I leave preparation, there's one other piece that I want to add, and then we'll come back to that if that's okay.
Okay.
So I have a soft heart also, and there are certain people that I feel sometimes called to work with, and they cannot afford my fee. Now I have a choice. I can choose, and that's why it's so great to be in charge of yourself.
Sure.
I can have my bottom line and I'm ready to walk away. And then somebody, I can't even explain it. I can only use this term. I feel called to work with them. I see
Yeah.
something in them. I know that I can help them, and I want to. So I can give up my price. I can choose to do that. But it's conscious.
Yes.
It's not for all those other reasons that I'm scared and they're going to walk away and then I'm going to lose the whole thing. So I just want to kind of add that in, that you do have permission to go against your own rules if you choose, right?
Yeah.
So coming back to the other question in terms of what are the things that we want to be, that we need to train. And I call this body mind, I call it an instrument. Because when we learn how to manage this instrument, we become very, very fine-tuned. We pick up the nuances. We pick up people's discomfort. We pick up their energy. Really, I just had a conversation with a colleague of mine, and I could, he was saying all the right things, but I could feel he was really kind of a lot of stress. He was doing his best to kind of tell me all the right things, but my intuition and my experience tells me, yeah, there's something else going on here. So how do we train this instrument? So I like to talk about it this way, Rosie. We have what they call a window of tolerance for stress, right? And as long as we're in our nervous system's window of tolerance, we're good. You say this, you say that, I'm not throwing off my game, I'm really good. Right? But when something comes along that hits our nervous system's window of tolerance, okay, it's our nervous system's capacity, we go into the stress response. And our fingers get tingly, our heart starts to race, we get sweaty palms. But most importantly, for those people who are really into high pressured situations, we can't think clearly.
Right.
The brain goes offline. Literally. Okay, so if you think about, this is the brain, and this is the kind of the primitive part of the brain that gets, kind of triggered by certain patterns that we have in our history. And then it gets processed in this middle range is where the emotions get processed, and memory and all these other kinds of things. And then there's this very quick circuit that goes over here. This is the prefrontal cortex. This is the part of our brain that makes executive decisions, good executive decisions. So we want this all working, even if we get triggered, that this part stays online. Because when we're over our capacity, really, honestly, the wiring just gets lost. Where was I can't remember, and then we start to hesitate, and then we kind of lose ourselves. Now, that may happen, okay, but again, there are tools to bring yourself back. But let's start out with the tool that we want first is to increase our nervous system's tolerance for stress. And the way that we do that is through meditation, through breathing, through focus exercises, where, let's just say, you can begin to take in maybe 3, 4, 5, 6 breaths and let them out. And then we can work up to 10, 12 breaths and then let it out. We can work up to 15 breaths in and 15 breaths out. That takes time because we're expanding our lungs. We're expanding the amount of oxygen that our body can tolerate. And at the same time, we are quieting down the nervous system. We've got the sympathetic nervous system, that is the stress response one, and then the parasympathetic one, which is Yeah. Everything.
Interesting. Well, first of all, I want to go back and say that I love the fact that you recognize when you connect with someone. And I think you, like myself and a lot of people that, are doing the work that we're doing as coaches, we kind of get into this work because we want to help first. Before we even think, oh, I want to start a business or whatever, I got into this work because I saw a need to empower and encourage women more than anything to advocate for themselves. So I just want to, thank you for recognizing that with your clients, and when you have that connection, I feel it too. And it's really nice to be able to be guided. And I totally believe that things happen for a reason and all that stuff. And by the way, your message that you just talked about kind of explains, I've been in a little bit of a tizzy over the last couple of weeks. And that's because my son told me that he's moving from, I live in Chicago, so he's moving from Chicago to Scottsdale. And it's funny, as you were describing everything that you were saying about the prefrontal cortex, I've been kind of like in a haze over the last couple of weeks. And I have to say, emotionally, it's been really tough. I haven't really been present. I've been kind of off my game. And just in the last couple of days, I've been kind of like starting to come back to me. But it's going to be really difficult for me to have my son live in Scottsdale versus Chicago. And, he's going to be 25. So it's.
Oh, we know all the logical reasons.
Sure. So I'm kind of thinking of the same process as you are trying to go for that job promotion, and maybe you don't earn it and you're like disappointed, and you kind of have to go through all of the emotional loss of you thought you had this job and then it turns out that you don't. So I think it's really important for us to not only prepare for the negotiation, but also prepare for the aftermath. Whether you get the job or you don't get the job, we still have to prepare for that, because one of my guests that talks about confidence, she says, you have to be able to allow yourself to sit in the suck for like a day or two to feel the emotions so that you can continue to move forward, So I think everything that you described makes so much sense with any kind of process that we need to get through. Absolutely. For sure.
And you use the word process because that is really what needs to happen. When we have an expectation that's over here and the reality is over here, what do we have in between? Nothing but frustration and disappointment, right? So for something like your son or a job or something that we really want to happen in a certain way, we have an expectation that it should, or it takes us time to get over here. Okay, this is the reality.
Yes.
This is it. All right. And now I got to move forward again.
Yes. And for me, with my son, it's the loss of me seeing him on a day-to-day basis, regular basis, because he's graduating from college. And so in May, and, just coming home from work or, whatever. And now I'm like, I'm not going to have that anymore, but it's all right. Part of being a parent is letting go. So.
And again, we have all the logic in the world, and our kids, we raise them to be free agents. And then when they are, it's like, where are you going?
And, I'm 53 years old, so it's not like I'm a young parent or anything, but it is so hard when you're in that emotional state, it's so hard to rationalize, your thoughts and to, think, oh, he'll be fine. Or, oh, it was no big deal. I was supposed to get that job and I didn't. So it does take a little bit of having to feel those feelings to be able to get on the other side. And then even if you did get the job, say you're stepping into a more senior role, an executive role, and then you realize that you now have the job and now you have to perform. That's another thing of like, I prepared so much up to this point, but then what's next? So it's just, again, it's a process, right?
So I think what you're also saying, Rosie, is that the one thing that we can depend on in life is change.
Yes. Yes. Always. The only thing that is constant is change, right?
It's true.
Now,
It's,
you talked a little bit earlier about role playing and practicing. So why don't we talk a little bit about your course, maybe? Like, what are the components of your course, and if you can tell us, what the price is, because I think having a course and a directive of like a step-by-step process would be really important to our listeners.
cool. So this course came from, honestly, again, that story that I told you.
Okay.
And I started to look through all the different pieces of what I then needed to focus on. So preparation, yes, is number one. Number two, and I'm not exactly sure, this course has 4 little modules. Maybe
Okay.
they're about 10, 15 minutes, maybe at the most. Um, but another one is really kind of being an active listener.
Hmm.
So one of the things that I pride myself on, honestly, is I call myself a professional listener because that's what I
Hmm.
am. And I do remember when I first started paying attention to this that I'm pretty intuitive, so I kind of would assume people were going in a certain place, or I know exactly what you're thinking, or all of those kinds of, I don't know exactly what you're thinking.
Right.
I could have a hunch about what you're thinking.
Sure.
But unless you're going to tell me and confirm and validate for me, I do not know.
Hmm.
So I have some rules for myself when it comes to listening. And this is, I would probably say, as best I possibly can, particularly when I'm working with clients or, any kind of really important situation. I like to say that I'm staying on the same wavelength. So, Rosie and I met and we started to talk, and it's easy for us.
Yeah.
Right? We both kind of care about people. We're not exactly the same profession. So we sort of, excuse me, sort of on the same wavelength.
Hmm.
Not everybody's going to be like that, as we know.
Sure.
There's people that is kind of like, could you repeat that again? Could you? So my goal is to stay on the same wavelength with whomever I'm having a conversation with.
Mm.
So let's just say that, when I live someplace where the trains kind of go by and I get distracted by a train and I've missed what you just said. Now, typically what people will do is they'll just kind of go on. No, I'm going to stop and say, Rosie, could you repeat what you just said? Because I missed it, or I got
Uh,
distracted for a moment, or I'm not sure I heard you right. Or so we're on the same wavelength. I go off, I get distracted, something else happens, then now we're back on again. Okay,
okay.
something else happens, now we're back on again. And the reason that people, countries argue, the conflict, is because we don't understand each other.
Yes.
So, as a professional listener, you're working to really understand that person across from you.
Hmm.
What is it they're looking for? What can I provide for you? Whatever the questions are, that you listen carefully and you take it in. You don't have to, you don't have to come back like that. You're going to let it land. If I understand you correctly, excuse me, is this what you're saying? And as a counselor, as a coach, we're trained. We have sentences that we have learned. And you do it over and over and over again, and it honestly becomes second nature. You
Hmm.
said it to me earlier, Rosie. You said, I think I'm understanding, is this what you're saying? And so it behooves you to really become an excellent communicator, a really, really, really good listener. And I talk a lot about assertiveness training and what that looks like, and how you get what you want, how to phrase sentences so that you don't offend anybody. That if you're picking up somebody's resistance, so let's just say I offer XYZ and they may not even say anything, or they just kind of roll their eyes, or I'm going to pick that up
Hmm.
and I'm going to pay attention to it. And as soon as I pick up somebody's resistance to what I'm saying or doing, I have to change the tactic. A lot of times we get into the, oh, he was so, difficult, and he was, or she was so this, or she was so that. Maybe we could be better
Yes.
at communicating. I was just listening. I have a young client, a 16-year-old. I had a meeting with her and her mother the other day, and it was as clear as a bell to me why they were at each other's throat. She started to lecture her, and she went on and on and on and on. And
Oh,
the young woman said, "Mom, when you do that," she said, "I'm checking out."
Been
So,
there, done that.
right? So, so active listening is incredibly, incredibly important. So we have preparation, we have active listening, we have learning how to calm down this nervous system. So that's another part, sort of this emotional piece. And then I can't remember the fourth module. I just kind of put the whole thing together.
Okay.
But by the end of it, you will have kind of all the information that you need to practice to become the confident negotiator.
Got it.
Stuff does not happen overnight.
Absolutely. And as far as role playing, what do you recommend people can do at home? Because obviously not everybody has a coach, but everybody does have a friend, a spouse, or a family member. Right. So when it comes to role playing, what do you recommend for them to do?
So one of the things that I would do is, and if you can have just even a friend, somebody or a family member kind of play the opposite. One is, I am looking for a job. Okay, I'm the person seeking the job. You are the employer, and we start kind of role playing. Where I'm coming in. How I ask for what's your salary range, and all the different things that you can put in there, so that you practice the actual experience. Again, I'm an experiential learner. We learn by experience.
Sure.
And so then we go back and well, where did I get stuck? Well, you said that I'm not going any further, and this is it. And then it's like, okay, so what do I decide to do?
Right.
Right. So that's one way you can role play. Another way you can role play is imagining that somebody has a lot of money, or that there's a high salary, or again, because this can go in so many different directions. If you're in business for yourself and you're making a proposal, or you're the other one on the other end of the proposal, and you can keep switching roles. What happens when you don't have a lot of money, or there's not a lot of money on the table? What happens in here? What are you feeling? What are you thinking? Where is your bottom line? And so the goal is to be able to think quickly on your feet.
Yes.
I mean, that's really, again, and you don't have to answer right away, but you have to allow the information to how many times do a lot of times I don't even hear what people are saying. I just kind of pick up the vibe of what they're saying.
Okay.
Right. And that comes from being very, very, very aware of yourself. Mm-hmm. I want to give a little definition of what mindfulness, the way that I have kind of used it and learned. Mindfulness is being aware in the present moment without judgment.
Oh boy, that was a big one, Tina. I think you need to repeat that one.
Being aware, mindfulness is being aware in the present moment without judgment.
I was with you up until the without judgment, because like in my head, I'm thinking, yep, I can be in the present moment without judgment. Holy cow. I think that's going to take practice, because I'm trying to advocate for me, and the other person's basically telling me no, or maybe not right now. How do you, in your head, I'm like just trying to picture that moment where I'm trying to have a conversation, and I'm trying to be in the present moment, and I'm trying to not judge, but it's not happening, Tina, because they're telling me no.
So I could be aware pretty quickly of my disappointment.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But I also, again, I have a 3 month program. It's called Mastery Under Pressure.
Okay.
And in there, I start talking. We start out again with the body, getting the body quiet and calm. But I have a whole section on what I call productive thinking.
Hmm.
Do my thoughts produce something useful for me?
Okay.
As opposed to positive thinking. Oh, everything's wonderful.
Right.
Everything's going to work out. Oh, maybe, maybe not. But I like to do my thoughts produce something useful for me. So if somebody is telling me, basically, we're not a match, is what they're telling me.
Yes.
So I have to kind of take that in. I may be disappointed, but the truth is, we're not a match.
Okay.
It's the same thing in dating.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'm so rejected. Well, maybe, we're not a match.
Right.
I could think we are, but he or she doesn't think we are. So we're not. And it's the same thing with the jobs. My daughter-in-law just has been looking for a job for quite some time as a postdoc, and she's just got this whole thing in data. She's got a PhD in um, actually educational psychology.
Okay.
And she applied for a job. She applied actually, and they came out maybe 3, 4, 5 months after she put the resume in, and they called her, and she had an interview, and it was a great interview. And she said to me afterwards, she said, they're looking for somebody that has a lot of experience with diabetes,
Mm.
and I don't. And I don't know whether they're going to take me because I have all the other experience. And the woman came back and she said, I'm sorry, but we're not going to go any further with this. But I have a colleague at so and so school, and they're looking for somebody with just your qualifications. She passes her name on, and now she's working. She's going to start this
Mm.
new job with somebody else. So was she disappointed? Yes. This one was local, and again, going back to where your kids are,
Yeah.
and this one, if she's taking it part time, but if she decides to go full time, they may move with my little granddaughter. And
Mm-hmm.
um, but the point is, she understood that she was a highly qualified candidate, but she did not have all the qualifications that they were looking for.
Right.
So when we come back to, yes, our expectations are over here and our reality is over here, how quickly can we get here? The reality was that she wasn't a match.
And we also have to recognize that good for her for applying for that, because I'm sure the job description said, you needed to have that diabetes experience. But that's one of the things that we're constantly trying to let people know, women know, apply for the job anyway, because you never know if you can get the on the job training or you're the best qualified candidate. But so kudos to your daughter for applying, even though she didn't have all the qualifications.
Yes.
Now, we also talked about in the negotiating, sometimes you need to just be quiet. So let's talk about that.
Yes, and yes. And so part of my training as a clinical social worker, very, very early on, was to learn how to be quiet. And when we do that, other people will fill the space because most people are not comfortable with silence. So if we talk about anxiety and stress and so on, anxiety gets raised when we feel like we're out of control. And so when there is a level of uncertainty and kind of like what's going on here, we get anxious. That's why we need structure. So if I were to get on this show with you, Rosie, and I was just going to sit there and you asked me a question and I didn't answer.
Yeah.
At some point you would fill in.
Okay, like, where's this going, Tina?
Where's this going? Right? And so on. So again, it's part of understanding communication and human nature. So you might put out a question to somebody, a potential person that you're negotiating with, and just wait a little bit. and watch. Part of being an active listener is watching the person that you're kind of on the other side of. What is their body language saying? What are you feeling? Um, do you take the opportunity to say, I'm wondering if that question made you a little uncomfortable, or whatever it is that you might think might be going on, you can ask. But if you just put out a question and you wait a little bit, sometimes people need time to come up with their answers.
Absolutely.
Right?
I have to just say that I listened to this fantastic podcast. It's called The Hidden Brain. And
Yes.
it's
Yes, I heard
all
that one.
about,
Yes.
psychology and, all kinds
Neuroscience,
of,
all that
yes.
stuff.
And one of the guests on The Hidden Brain said that she has a surefire way of reading someone's mind. And so I listened to the whole episode. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited to listen to this. And then at the end, she says, simple, ask them. I'm like, oh. I was like, that makes so much sense. If you want to know what someone is thinking, just ask them. So,
Yes,
yes.
absolutely. So a lot of what we're talking about comes with experience over time,
Mhm.
being incredibly, incredibly self-aware. When I go back to that again, that story that I told at the very beginning, had I not, had I been not been willing to be non-judgmental with myself, I could never have gotten the answers that I got.
Yes.
I could have just stopped with, oh my God, you're so stupid. I can't believe that you did that. That was a really dumb thing that you did. And I could have just stopped there and felt really bad about myself. Or I just, yeah, that was kind of not the smartest thing in the world. But how did you get there?
Well,
Opened a whole universe for me.
and I think you said some key words there: be non judgmental with yourself as well. Obviously,
Ah,
be
yes.
non-judgmental with others, but we are our own worst judgmental, individuals, and we treat ourselves so poorly sometimes. So I do like the fact that you specifically expressed be non-judgmental with yourself as well. I think that's
And that
key.
that is a huge learning and a practice, because our brain is designed to protect us from danger.
Yes.
So it is constantly giving up thoughts, thousands and thousands of thoughts in a day. It is the monkey mind, as people talk about.
Mm-hmm.
And it'll grab you here and it is an untrained mind. You cannot be really good at all the stuff that we're talking about without training your own instrument. You
Absolutely.
just can't, because you're just going to be swayed all over the place by the emotion that comes up based on our early childhood and patterns and things that we have created and stories that we believe about ourselves and so on.
Well,
So
and you literally just described what I've been experiencing over the last couple of weeks, because with the experience now that I have again, it's taken me, roughly 7 to 10 days to really come to accept the fact that my son is moving. And I kind of went through all those emotions. And now I'm like, okay, it's going to be okay. There's planes and there's, trains and automobiles and all that stuff to go see him back and forth. But like I said, just in the last couple of days, I'm like, okay, it's going to be okay. But I have noticed that every day I'm kind of soothing myself emotionally, mentally. It's going to be okay. Things are fine. Things happen for a reason. And soothing myself from you're going to be fine. So it's like,
and the trick of all this, Rosie, honestly, is we have to get to the place where we actually believe it.
yes, yes.
We can tell ourselves all kinds of things. I did a TEDx talk in June
Oh, okay.
called Befriend Your Inner Enemy.
Mm,
And I start out really talking about these patterns that show up. We get so annoyed with ourselves over and over. Oh my God, there it is again. There it is again. There it is.
yes.
It's not that people don't want to change. They just don't know how.
Mm.
Just don't know how. And so everything that we're talking about and all the things that I've learned over the year, these are skills. I'm really a teacher at heart. And we put people into all kinds of high pressured situations with no training. And I always say that if you were an Olympic level athlete, you would no sooner go out there to compete without really kind of doing the work that we're talking about, peak performance work, stress management work, all these things about how to manage disappointment and competition. And it's all in there. And if we expect of ourselves to be able to manage things without this level of training, we're kidding ourselves.
Yes. Yes. And actually, again, the first couple of days when I learned that he's moving, I'm like having all these emotional, you just hormones all over the place. And I'm like, I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine. But I didn't believe it. I was just like, oh, fine, bawling. But the last couple of days, I'm like, okay, it's going to be fine. And now I believe it. And that's like the big transition from when I learned it to today. I'm not going to lie, it's been a roller coaster, but there's been a lot of growth for me, a lot of acceptance, a lot of letting go, and that whole thing. So, but it is so interesting that once you believe it, then you're able to move forward with that. And by the way, I will link your TEDx talk to all of your contact information. Now, I do know that we also talked about your gift. So I think people can go onto your website and you have the 4 tips to peak performance. Can you just tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So actually, I have 5 parts of my program, and I picked four out of the 5 on the tips, but they have little exercises. So I teach focus, when we're in focus, when we're out of focus. There's laser focus, there's wide, broad focus. Each one of them has a different purpose and when to use what and so on. So I teach focus, relaxation, being able to get into that change your nervous system in an instant, which is what you actually can do with the breath.
Mm-hmm.
The breath is the only voluntary mechanism that we have that can change these nervous systems in an instant. Right? So our breath is extremely powerful. And a lot of times people, and everybody knows when you're feeling anxious, breathe. So a lot of times people will breathe and no, that breath will make you more anxious. It's really learning how to breathe from way down deep in your belly and bringing it all the way up and down and so that it expands the whole up and down your spine and again expands the nervous system. So focus, relaxation, dealing with the negative self-talk, which we talked about, how to visualize, which is a lot of what we were sort of touching on when we were talking about preparation, visualizing the experience before you're in it. How do I want to be? How do I want to dress? I just have another client we were talking about. She's got a court case coming on, with a divorce and a really kind of nasty ex-husband and judge. I said, don't dress to the nines. Don't look so successful. Visualize what it'd be, how you want to be and the way that you want to kind of portray yourself so that, again, emotionally that will connect. So visualization and then fear. Fear is, as I have 2 favorite sayings about fear. One is that it's the only thing that gets smaller as you get closer.
Oh. Tell me more about that. It's the only thing that gets smaller as you get closer.
It gets closer. So you're petrified of your son leaving.
Yes.
Right? The relationship's not going to be the same. You're not going to see him. And, whether you acknowledge it or we talk about it in that way, but there's a lot of fear. There's a lot of fear of losing that connection in the way that the relationship is, right? Mm-hmm. But as you have chosen to keep working it, the fear has gotten smaller.
Yes.
By paying attention to it.
That makes sense.
Right? Our first reaction to fear is to avoid.
Yes.
I don't want to go there. I don't want to look at it. And yet fear is our best teacher. It's telling us something. It's telling us that something's important to us and that we're feeling out of control. And so there's a whole universe of, and then I help people kind of find it in the body. And then the body gives us lots of information, and because the body holds all the memory. And so, and then the other one is the only way past it is through it.
Yes. Yeah, I definitely know that.
Right? I can tell you from this end of doing that TED Talk, the only way past it was through
it. So let me ask you this, Tina. How afraid or how nervous were you the day of your TED Talk?
Oh, I was very nervous.
Okay.
And at the same time, I was extremely prepared. I was probably more prepared than any other person that gave the talk. I spent months.
Yes.
Writing it, rewriting it, getting coached, memorizing it, giving it over and over and over again, having people evaluating it, rewriting it, doing the pitches 3 times. So yes, I was nervous, but I also could depend that I know how my brain works. And I used a lot of visualization as I was learning it. So for each different part of it, I had an image.
I love that.
Up the image, and then I knew exactly where I was going. And I gave it we were there for like 2 or 3 days ahead of time, and I gave it to my husband. Oh God bless him. A whole bunch of times, and I kept getting stuck at the beginning. And so I was more nervous about that than and I actually, when I gave it, I didn't give it exactly as I had memorized it. And when you're in that kind of situation, there is no think time.
Right.
You're on, and you just gotta go. And so I was praying that the way that I realized it kind of really soon on, that the correction that I made actually was seamless. Nobody would have known what I did, but I knew.
Yeah.
So afterwards, I kind of, as I was sitting there afterwards, like, did that make sense? Did that make sense?
Yeah.
But once I got going, it was the most fun thing I've ever done.
That's awesome. And that's a good example of how practice and role playing helps you when you're actually doing the conversation that you're, planning on doing for whatever it is, whatever goal you're trying to do. So absolutely. Well, congratulations. I'm so happy that it went well. And I have not yet seen it, but I will watch it for sure. So I'm excited. Oh my gosh, Tina. Well, you have given us such an amazing array of information. And so from our conversation, are there like 2 tips that you think are the best 2 tips for women in the corporate world in negotiating anything that they could, that you could leave them with?
Yes. So my number one go-to thing, no matter what situation that I'm in, that's kind of high pressure or high stakes, what's in my control, what's out of my control.
Oh gosh. Yes.
That is really my, whenever I start to feel like the world is closing in on me, or I feel really anxious, or again, I go like this because it happens, the body gets triggered before the mind. So if you know yourself really well and you know how your body reacts, I already know when I start to tighten up here, something feels out of control around me. Okay, so if I'm in a negotiation and I'm starting to feel that way, then the next thing that I would do is I would take that breath, and I would just take that moment. So again, when we're anxious, the mind kind of goes. So if I recognize it, that my mind, that I'm kind of not holding on to everything that's going, I can't keep it. I'm just gonna, just kind of take a moment and just ground myself. Now I'm back. So it's reconnecting. My brain's gone away. Okay, I'm going to bring you back. I'm just going to come back into my heart. I'm going to come back to my feet. I'm going to take the permission that I'm going to give myself. I don't have to be like this.
Right.
Okay? And the other piece of that is, the more you practice kind of what I'm talking about, the more your level of presence is calming to other people.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
So the last little story, I had a client who was highly anxious, highly anxious, a young man, very handsome, very smart, but he would walk in, this is how long it was, with a tape recorder, and he would put the tape recorder down on my desk and he'd say, could I tape our sessions? I said, of course, you can, they're your sessions. So he comes in one day and he brings his tape recorder and he slams it down on my desk with a not a very nice thing. I don't know what you do to me, he said, but I walk in here and I'm really anxious and I walk out and I'm really calm and I cannot find it on the tape. It's kind of like that story that they told you. And I said, well, what I do is I work on myself.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
Right? And the more you work on yourself and the calmer you are in any position of leadership, people will want to hang around you.
That is so interesting. First of all, so you said the first tip was figure out what's within your control and out of your control. And the second piece was, what was the second piece?
Take the breath.
Take the breath. Okay. So I do know that as I get older, I always kind of go back to, okay, can I control this? And that's kind of part of my process with my son. It's like, okay, he's already decided he's moving in with his girlfriend, doing all the stuff. And part of it was like, okay, you know what? All I can say is, bud, I love you. I support you. I hope you're happy. Obviously, I'm going to be here, but it's out of my control. And then I have to just let him go. So, but it's the same in business. It's like, what can you control? And then what can you do about it? And a lot of it is the mind body. So those are fantastic tips. All right, Tina. Well, I'm kind of sad that our time is over because we have had a great conversation. I actually think I've gotten like some therapy with you, Tina.
Good. That's wonderful.
This has been fantastic. And I will make sure that all the contact information is going to be on the blog so people can find you. But you are doing fantastic work. By the way, the course is how much? How much are you charging for your course?
$97.
Oh my gosh, that is a fantastic price. Thank you so much. That's very generous because with everything that you cover there, I know courses are a lot more than that. So I think that's a perfect price point. And I thank you for all of your wisdom and your knowledge that you have shared with us. And I need to send Joy Selden a thank you because she was the one that connected us. And I'm so glad that she did because this was fantastic. And I'm going to let you provide any final words to our listeners.
I think that pretty much what I've said, and I think you can hear my passion
Yes.
around this. The Confident Negotiator has pieces of my larger course, which is Mastering Under Pressure. And what we've decided to do is to sell it without me, or if you want me, then there's different price points if you want me to come and do the coaching. But it's a lot of it speaks for itself, and that also is extremely reasonable.
Okay.
It has everything that we've kind of talked about. And my hope is that you take this information and use it, because as you keep moving up your ladder, you're the leaders, yes. Right? And everything comes from the top. So you do this work, like Rosie's doing this work, and my friend Joy's doing it. People are doing this work, and we're spreading it. We're spreading it to our employees. We're spreading it to our children. We're spreading it to our spouses. And I do believe that this is our little slice of world peace.
And actually, I just want to say that Joy was the one that I opened the negotiating with because she deals with emotions. And we talked a lot about your emotions and all that. So that was the first episode of our negotiating series. So this is the perfect way to close this series. And it has been fantastic. So Tina, thank you so very much for your time.
Thanks so much, Rosie.
That was the perfect ending to the 8-part series on how to negotiate in the corporate world. You could tell that Tina is very passionate on sharing her knowledge and her skills. And I hope that this entire series, but specifically this conversation, will help you become a better, more confident negotiator in your life, but especially in your corporate world. Tina left us with 2 tips. Tip number 1 is, she says, which is her go-to, is figure out what's within your control and what's out of your control. And obviously you're going to be focusing on what's within your control. Tip number 2 is, she says, just take a breath. Take a breath, and then that way your nervous system comes down just a little bit, and being able to be more in control with your emotions takes time, it takes practice, but you will be able to get there with time and practice so that you can master yourself and become, again, a confident negotiator. A couple other reminders. Tina does have a course. She's charging $97. You can go on her website to get that information. And I will link all of the contact information on the episode blog. So again, I think for me, this has been a passion project. I will be able to provide you with some documents on my website at a later date that will encompass a lot of the powerful phrases that I've been talking about this whole time. One of the reasons why I did this series is because I wanted to provide you, the listener, with some powerful phrases that you can incorporate, because my whole thing is I help career women articulate their worth with massive confidence, conviction, and clarity. And this series was done specifically to provide you with those power phrases that you can use in your negotiating. So definitely go through my website and look to see how you can get those documents. So this has been a great experiment, a great project for me. And I hope to do another series like this, maybe on storytelling in a few more episodes. So with that, I will leave you with my standard, which is remember to be brave, be bold, and take action.
Thank you for listening to this episode. Let these stories of self-encouragement and professional development serve as a guide in navigating through corporate America in the most practical and fulfilling way possible. Do not forget to subscribe to the show at nowomanleftbehind.com for more content like this. Leave a rating and share it with your friends, because we want to make sure that no woman is left behind. Until I see you next time, remember to be brave, be bold, and take action.